What's up, guys? This is Zach with Top Tech Nation, and today we're going to be looking at the Sun and Moon 3 set, and that is going to be the equivalent of our Burning Shadow set that we're going to see in the West in August. But in Japan, as usual, there are two subsets, or mini sets, if you will, and they're going to be called Did You See the Fighting Rainbow and Light Consuming Darkness. So as with our videos that we normally do, this is going to be kind of like an early impressions video or initial thoughts where I'm just going to be skimming through the list here and kind of giving my thoughts of this set. Now, we don't know exactly which cards are going to make the cut for Sun and Moon 3, but usually, you know, I'd say about 90-95% of the cards do in fact make the cut. It's not like a Sun and Moon 3 Plus set or anything like that. But that said, you know, there might be a few cards that don't really make the cut, and they're usually going to be released through like promo boxes or the following set or something like that. And before I start the video, I do want to give a shout out to PokeBeach because they do a great job posting these translations. I think within a couple days of the set leaking, they pretty much had everything up. So check them out. I definitely want to give credit to them because they do a great job with this. But with that said, we are going to go ahead and jump into it. We're going to be looking at the Light Consuming Darkness first. So let's go ahead and do this. So as far as our grass types go, you know, I'm not going to look at every single card, every single common and uncommon, but anything that I think seems fairly notable, I will kind of look over it and just kind of give you my ideas and thoughts as far as, you know, how the cards are good or bad and in a competitive aspect. So we have Butterfree here. So it's a stage 2, it's a grass type, so it works with forest giant plants to get it out really quickly. Bye-bye healing, heal all damage from each of your Pokemon, then shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it in your deck. So right off the bat, this is pretty strong with any kind of grass deck for a single energy. With Forest of Giant Plants, you get it out the first turn if you want, or just in a pinch if you need it, but it heals all damage from each of your Pokemon. So, you know, if all of your Pokemon are damaged, it's almost the equivalent of like playing 5 or 6 max potions. And then it goes back in the deck and you can just reuse it. So I could definitely see this in something like a Decidueye deck or a, you know, Lurantis GX deck, anything that can really take advantage of the grass typing and the healing and stuff like that. The attack isn't, I mean, the second attack isn't all that great. It's doing 60 for 3 energy. It might paralyze, but you know, realistically, I would say people are going to be using it for that first attack. It seems really strong, kind of situational, kind of techie, having to devote 3 spots, but you never know, it could be pretty good. So let's see what else we have here. Tangrowth doesn't seem all that appealing, doesn't really, looks like it's not really doing a whole lot of damage for what it's doing. But I do want to go over this Gallispod, or Gallisapod GX. Hopefully I'm not butchering that name. It looks pretty interesting. The Wimpod has some synergy. Looks like it works pretty well with it. So the basic, it has this ability called Wimp Out. And during your first turn, this Pokemon's retreat cost is 0. Now, it's a shame it can't be something like Magnemite from Breakthrough, where it's like for each Magnemite you have on the bench, its retreat cost is reduced. That'd be pretty cool. But it's only during your first turn. But thankfully, this does work with Forest of Giant Plants while we still have the set. So, I mean, you could still see it at Worlds in like the standard format, but afterwards, it's probably going to be something in expanded format. But this is really strong because I can attach an energy to the benched Wimpod. I can retreat for nothing, and then I can bring up the Gallispod. And Gallisapod here, it has an attack called First Impression. So use it on your first attack, more than likely. Does 90 more damage if this Pokemon became your active during this turn. So that is really, really strong. 120 damage your first turn right off the bat. Let's go ahead and attach a Choice Band to it. That's doing 150. And then as far as your other damage, you can use like Professor Kukui. You can get the non-GX Lurantis, so it'll boost it by another 20. So I mean, realistically, it wouldn't be surprising if your deck is fast enough and consistent enough to be doing 170 to 190 damage on your first turn. So taking those first 2 prizes. And then after that, I mean, they're going to take a turn or 2 to get their energy set up. And you can just go ahead and use Cut Cross GX, you know, with a Choice Band that's doing 180 damage. And then Armor Press is doing 100 and you're reducing damage. So, I mean, I think this is probably one of the more playable GXs from this set. I'm sure we'll get it in August. So, it may even make a splash at the World Championships. I mean, you never know. It might just do that. So, be on the lookout for that. I think it's one of the better GXs in the set. This Gyarados has a little bit of hype here. If you know the Gyarados from the days of like Platinum and Stormfront, Diamond and Pearl, you'll know that it's kind of similar. You know, this Gyarados says that it does 50 damage times the number of Magikarp in your discard. And I think it was the one from Stormfront was like 30 damage times. I'm not really sure because I actually started playing competitively a few years after that when the Heart Gold Soul Silver cards came out. But for a DCE, this is pretty solid. Will it replace the other Gyarados? I don't know. I don't think it's quite as strong. The other one, basically, you could leave the Magikarps on the bench and use Team Magma's secret base to kind of put damage on that and power up Gyarados' attack. This one's a little bit different. You have to actually have them in your discard, and that's, you know, worlds apart, because that means you have to spend a turn evolving, and that's really going to be its Achilles heel. Basically, if you can't evolve the Gyarados, your opponent just Lysanders it up and knocks it out. So maybe in the future, if there's a card that says you can evolve into a stage 1 right away, like Broken Time Space or Forest of Giant Plants, but in the meantime, I don't think this is all that great. But, you know, don't cut it out. It could be pretty good in the future. Now, trying to see what else we have here. It looks like Bruxish is a water type. It's a basic. And this could actually be squeezed into the water box type of decks that play like Lapras, GX, Manaphy, EX, Glaceon, EX, things like that. Your big basic water attackers. Synchronize is doing 60 damage, so 90 with the choice band, and then 20 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon that have the same type as the active. So basically what that means is that if your opponent is playing a Darkrai GX or a Darkrai EX, then I can do 90 to it with the choice band. And let's say they have 2 or 3 other Darkrai EXs on the bench. Pretty common. It's going to be doing 20 to those as well, since they're also dark types. So this could be pretty strong. Hard to say for sure. You could always Ninja Boy into it from like a Lapras or something like that. But the good thing is that it is a single prize attacker. It's not a GX or an EX or anything. So if Articuno is rotating, which it probably is, because I think it was in Roaring Skies, I think the rotation is more than likely going to be Breakthrough on, just to kind of keep those break mechanics while also rotating things like Shaman and Trainer's Mail and stuff. This could be a solid one prize attacker in those decks, so be sure to be on the lookout for that as well. Raichu has this really interesting ability called Evo Shock. So when you evolve into Raichu, you can paralyze your opponent's active. So the ability is incredibly strong. Now, if this was the Circle Circuit Raichu that's doing 20 times the number of your bench Pokemon and it had Evo Shock, this would for sure be a deck. But the only thing is, this Volt Tackle attack is pretty terrible. Takes 3 attachments. You're doing 30 to yourself. Just not worth it at all. It doesn't have free retreat like Circle Circuit Raichu. And I think Circle Circuit Raichu is actually going to be legal in the fall. So you could play this as a one-of in that deck, or you could play a 1/1 line and something else just in case you want to disrupt your opponent. But it's really hard to say. I don't think it's all that great by itself. It definitely needs some kind of attacking partner that can benefit from the paralysis. Now, let's see, Electros. Looks like Electros is not terrible, but again, we're missing that kind of acceleration for lightning Pokemon. And speaking of that, we did do a deck profile for Raikou Magnezone featuring Tapu Koko. So check out our channel, and I think we just posted it a few days ago. So check that out if you're interested. But, you know, I think it will be rotating as far as the Magnezone goes. So I don't think Electros really has a lot of potential unless they give you something like a lightning patch, kind of like Aqua Patch or Dark Patch. Anything like that to kind of help these lightning Pokemon. Seviper is really interesting. I read this earlier this morning as I was skimming over the final translations and everything. Poison Up is a really strong ability. As long as it's in play, you have to place an additional damage counter on your opponent's poison Pokemon between turns. So in Standard, maybe this isn't all that great, but in Expanded, this is going to be really good with anything that can poison your opponent. So the Ariados, which is, I think, an Ancient Origin, so more than likely it's going to rotate. That's pretty strong with this, because if I have 2 Sevipers out, basically the Ariados is almost like a Verbank City Gym. My opponent's Pokemon will be taking 30 damage between turns, but more importantly, with something like Hypnotoxic Laser, if you can play this with Verbank City Gym, there's really no limit to what you're doing. With a Seismitoad EX deck or a Giratina deck, you can item lock your opponent, and then they take 40 or 50 between turns instead of 30. And then you have things like Super Scoop Up, you have AZ and Acerola coming out pretty soon, especially in Expanded. I think Seismitoad Giratina will get a pretty huge boost from this. So I think this will be something to definitely test. Hard to say for sure because people do play Silent Lab, Hex Maniac, Counter Stadiums, but I think it'll be really strong in the near future. Now, Dusknoir is pretty interesting here. It has this ability called Dark Circle, and it says once per turn, you can look at your opponent's hand, and you put a basic Pokemon you find there onto their bench and put 30 damage on it, or 3 damage counters. So pretty strong if your opponent plays a lot of basics that they don't want to put down, such as Shaman. And then Mind Jack is very similar to Zoroark, except it's doing a little more damage, 30 versus 10, 30 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So strong attack, but if you look at the cost of the attack, it costs more than Zoroark, and it's a stage 2. So a bit of a letdown there because it probably won't see a whole lot of play, in my opinion, unless they bring back something like Dimension Valley, if they can make these stage 2s a little easier to get out. But only time will tell on that, of course. Let's see what we have here. Toxicroak. If this Pokemon's poison, it does 80 more damage, and then it's no longer poisoned. So again, this is one of those cases where I wish they had Dimension Valley because otherwise these psychic types, they're cool. I mean, they've seen some anime exposure in the cartoons and stuff. They are fan favorites. I think Toxicroak is actually in Pokken Tournament Deluxe on the Switch. But at the same time, I mean, they aren't really making it playable in the card game. It really needs something to kind of get those energy on the board. So we go on to the next GX Pokemon. That's going to be Necrozma GX, and it's a psychic type. It's got that beautiful artwork. Kind of reminds me of Zoroark. It's got that kind of same shape going on in the coloring and stuff, but it looks like it's made of these big black crystals. So it looks pretty awesome. Has this ability, it says End of Light. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by colorless Pokemon. So definitely a hard counter to something like Mega Rayquaza. Any kind of colorless Pokemon that is going to be coming out in the next season or two, Necrozma is going to be really, really good. And then it has 2 attacks here. Prism Burst, 10 damage, discard all psychic energy, and it does 60 more for each energy discarded this way. So maybe in a deck with playing things like Lunala GX or Solgaleo or something like that, get a bunch of psychic energy on the board, and then you just kind of, go to town. You're doing a bunch of damage, but you do have to discard the energy, so that's kind of unfortunate. And then Black Ray GX, 100 damage to each of your opponent's EX and GX Pokemon. Not affected by weakness, resistance, anything like that, but it's still really strong. I mean, for 3 energy, you're spreading 100 damage everywhere, so really you're doing upwards of like 600 damage. I think that's really, really strong. And if you think about it, there is a Meowstic in Generations, and I've been really wanting to make this Meowstic work forever, but it seems like it just never does. It has an attack for a single energy, and I think it lets you rearrange all the damage on the board. So if you can have your opponent get like 5 or 6 Pokemon out, maybe even play this with Tapu Koko early game, you can spread all that damage around, maybe have 600-700 damage on the board, and then you bring up Meowstic, and for a single energy, you take all 6 prizes. So a lot of potential there. I love Theory Moning just as much as playing, but it's hard to say. I mean, there might be counters that come along the way, but it's always fun to kind of Theory Mon, as they call it, and just kind of think about and speculate these strategies that are going to pop up in the near future. So we also have, looks like another Rhyperior line. When you play it down to evolve, discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. Not that great because it's a stage 2. If it was a stage 1 with a decent attack, it'd be a little bit different, but it seems like all of these Rhyperiors are just pretty terrible. I mean, even if I use a Maxie's Hidden Ball trick to get it out from the discard instead, it specifically says from the hand, so I still can't really activate that effect. So not that great. Sock is pretty interesting. It has this attack called Quick Guard. During your opponent's turn, prevent all damage done by your opponent's basics. So things like Darkrai, EX, and other attackers, Volcanion, and it says it can't use the attack during your next turn. Now, I'm curious if there will be a ruling that says something like, if you play a Pokemon Ranger, for example, that removes effects, if you can just basically spam this attack, use Quick Guard during your turn, Pokemon Ranger, Quick Guard. Even if you can't, I guess you can just retreat into another sock, but I'm not really sure what deck this will have an application for. Hard to say for sure. A lot of times these guys are a little bit ahead of their time, and it takes takes 2 or 3 additional sets. And finally, there's kind of like that aha moment where there's a perfect strategy that kind of works with it. So we'll have to see in the future about that. Now, Marshadow GX is another one that's pretty hyped. It's a fighting type. I love that artwork. It looks like a giant, like, roasted marshmallow with, like, fists coming out of it, so pretty cool. Shadow Hunt has this ability. It says it can use the attacks of basic Pokemon in your discard. So right away, I mean, this becomes, like, a go-to tech card for a lot of things. If there are any kind of decks that are weak to fighting, so right now like Turbo Darkrai, any kind of lightning deck, I guess, but I guess Tapu Koko is not really weak to fighting. It will be able to be splashable in that and hit for weakness. So Turbo Darkrai decks are going to be probably seeing a slight decline in play because of this card, because it's such an easy tech. And then if you look at the attacks here, 120 for 3 energy, pretty good already. And then 100 Fisher's GX, 50 times the number of basics attached to it. So something like Max Elixir, Carbink Break, you could definitely power it up really quickly. And it is a fighting type, so you could pair it up with things like Regirock EX. You can get 10 damage for each Regirock in play. So could be kind of like the new Zygarde deck, because if you have a bunch of these really interesting attackers in the discard, suddenly Marshadow can use those attacks and get boosted by Choice Band, Professor Kukui, and Regirock. So I think it'll be really strong in the future. And Alolan Rattata and Raticator, interesting because if you see here, maybe the dots aren't really the best way to represent it, but if you look at the attack here, you'll see it has a gray little dot that's not exactly a type. And what that means is that it can attack for 0 energy. So we've already seen Alolan Vulpix do pretty well in like the Metagross deck, any kind of stage 2 deck, but it looks like they're kind of keeping the trend. You can attack and get set up and basically not have to rely on energy quite as much. Focus energy, it says during your turn, this Pokemon's bite attack base damage is 60, so not the worst. You probably won't be using that a whole lot, but this one right here, Reinforced Fang, 10 damage, and if it has a tool card, it has 50 more. That's potentially pretty strong, because if you think about it, if you have a Choice Band on it, Alolan Raticate can actually hit for 0 energy and do 90 damage. And with a Professor Kukui, that is 110 damage for 0 energy for a 1 prize stage 1 attacker. Really, really strong. Combine that with something like Evolutions at Worlds, or an Expanded, and you can basically one-shot your opponent for 0 energy. So really, really strong there, in my opinion. You don't even have to play energy in the deck, period, if you don't want to. You can just kind of sit there. And, you know, judging by its other attack, Hyper Fang, I'm guessing this deck won't even play energy. You can play consistency cards, thicker supporter lines, maybe disruption cards like Team Flare Grunt, whatever you want. But I think that is something to be on the lookout of as far as a rogue deck goes. Now, coming up to Gardevoir GX, this is probably my favorite one of the set, or, you know, in my top 3 for sure. It has this ability called Fountain of Secrets. Once during your turn, you can attach a fairy energy to one of your Pokemon. So energy acceleration is always good. That always gives it a boost already, and I think it's going to make it really playable because the attacks are already pretty strong here. Infinite Force, 30 damage times the number of energy attached to both active Pokemon, so kind of like Mewtwo, except you don't have as much of an energy requirement. You can play Max Potion to keep healing it off. And the GX attack is search your discard for 10 cards and shuffle them back into your deck. Like, oh my god, this is really strong. If you think Hollow Hunt GX was strong with Decidueye, I mean, putting 10 cards in your discard. So if you're going against a Trash Avalanche Garbodor deck, for example, say you wasted a lot of resources to put items in the discard, use Rare Candy to get Gardevoir out, you have all these things on discard. So you use Twilight GX and you shuffle 10 items back in the deck, and suddenly Garbodor is doing absolutely nothing to you. So really, really strong. But keep in mind, it is a stage 2. It's going to require some setup to get out. The 230 HP makes it really bulky. It makes me think that we're probably going to see Max Potion played with it. The metal weakness is really strong because nothing is really played that's metal type except Metagross. I completely forgot about Metagross. That is something to worry about. But besides that, not much. And then it's resistant to dark, which is always strong. And keep in mind, you have Fairy Garden, so you do have free retreat there as well. But as far as partners with Gardevoir, it looks like I think there's a Deancey. I think it's in the other set. So we'll check it out in just a minute. There is a partner with it that I want to talk about. As far as some other stuff here, it looks like there's a Porygon Z that devolves everything. Could be okay, but it's a stage 2, but it might be good against Metagross. A lot of these evolution decks that are starting to pop up. And as far as the trainers go, we have a lot of playable trainers in this set, much like Guardians Rising, much like Sun and Moon. I mean, it looks like they're really trying to bump it up and make the format as diverse as possible. So we have Torment Spray, choose one card from your opponent's hand. If it's a supporter, they have to discard it. So right away, there's already some synergy with Sylveon GX. I mean, if you think about it, red card is not rotating because it was in Generations. So you could do this combo with red card, Delinquent, and Torment Spray and really just kind of mess your opponent up. I can play red card, which forces them to shuffle their hand and draw 4 cards. So already some disruption there. Delinquent lets me discard 3 cards from their hand, so they're probably going to keep their supporter. And then you play Torment Spray and you can discard the supporter and they are wiped out. So if you could do this for a couple turns, eventually they're in top deck mode. They're going to have to rely on that. And then you can just start doing 110 here and there, Plie GX to kind of get rid of their stuff they're already powered up. So I think it's really, really strong with that. It's awesome to see they're reprinting Super Scoop Up. It's going to make a lot of decks playable. A lot of these basic 1 energy attacker decks like Zygarde, it could be good for that. So I think Super Scoop Up will be fantastic. Guzma is almost like a better Lysander. Switch your opponent's active, and then you have to switch your active. So some decks might do a split of 1 Lysander, 1 Guzma, but I think Guzma is almost better because, I mean, as long as you have a free retreater on your bench, you have no worries whatsoever. And, you know, since it's functioning as a switch, if you have something stuck in the active, it'll help there as well. So I think it's really, really solid. We also have Wick. Each player shuffles their hand into their deck and draws a new hand of the same number of cards. I mean, this is pretty interesting. If you have a really bad hand of like 5, 6 cards, you can shuffle and draw that. But it's also helping your opponent as well. It's almost like an in, except a little bit worse. It's a little more situational. Potown, it says when you evolve a Pokemon, you have to put 30 damage on it. So really strong for basic decks. They might want to do that because it'll make things like Decidueye a better matchup, Metagross, things like that. And then, of course, with Potown as well, if you can somehow devolve your opponent's Pokemon, you might even get some cheap knockouts just from that. So it might be pretty interesting to see that. And then finally, you've got your full arts here, really beautiful cards. I mean, I guess they're technically all kind of like full arts to begin with, but these are really putting more emphasis on it. But really just beautiful cards, really great to see the direction that Pokemon is heading towards. We have a lot of great playable cards, playable trainers, a lot of deck diversity. You know, there's a good 20 plus decks that are in the format right now, and it's really great to see that. So we're just kind of scrolling down here, and we are... I think that's pretty much everything. We see a secret rare rescue stretcher. Pretty cool to see that it'll be in the format longer thanks to this reprint. And a secret rare fairy energy, of course, and that is really, really pretty. I think a lot of people are going to be spending a lot of money for this and Gardevoir. So, yeah, that's all I can say about that. But we're going to go ahead and step into the next set, the mini set here, and it's going to be called Did You See the Fighting Rainbow? So this set is, I think it features Ho-Oh and Charizard. I think they were on the cover of the packs here, but I'll go through these just like before. So Vileplume has an ability called Bitter Pollen. If it's your active Pokemon, your opponent's basic can't attack. So I'm actually pretty relieved that this Vileplume is not one where it shuts off items or something. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if they had printed something that said your opponent can't play supporters during your next turn or something like that instead of item cards. But you know, they've kind of toned it down a little bit. They realized, hey, you know, if Forest of Giant Plants somehow stays, this would be way too busted with the other Vileplume. So let's just kind of ease it down and just say your opponent's basics can't attack. So it's already really strong because I think Hex Maniac is actually rotating. So we're just kind of relying on like Silent Lab right now. So could be strong against these big basic decks. As far as some other stuff goes here, we are just kind of scrolling down. Charizard GX is really, really notable here, and I think it pairs extremely well with the Ho-Oh GX right below it. Charizard GX, it has this attack called Wing Attack, 70 damage, really just kind of a clean attack here, but Crimson Storm, 300 damage, discard 3 fires from this Pokemon, really, really strong. And the GX attack, discard 10 cards from your opponent's deck. Oh my gosh. So late game, this is pretty much going to win you games because let's say your opponent has just kind of burned through their deck. They're down to like 12 cards. They think they're safe. And then out of nowhere, Charizard takes out 10 of their cards and you just kind of sit there and just kind of take some damage and they just lose because they can't respond back. So really, really strong, but Ho-Oh is what makes it playable because as you can see, Charizard is a GX, or not a GX, but a stage 2 GX. So it's going to be hard to get it out by itself. You'll need Rare Candy, maybe Bridget, Alolan Vulpix, whatever you want to set up with. But Ho-Oh GX is a basic, thankfully, and it's got Eternal Light GX. Put 3 of any combination of Fire, EXs, or GXs onto your bench from your discard. So, I mean, this is a great way to make a lot of these fire types playable, like Incineroar, Charizard, you know, maybe even some older ones and expanded. The old Charizard, I don't really know for sure, but Ho-Oh is going to make these fire types a lot more playable. And its attacks are already pretty good. For 4 energy, it's doing 180, so 2-shotting most, and then Sacred Fire is sniping 50. Not quite as good as Ninetales because you need 3 energy versus 2, so probably won't be using that a whole lot, but getting Charizard out, we're going to be using Kiawe, which I'll talk about in just a minute. It's a new supporter that lets you Accelerate Fire Energy, probably a better version of Blacksmith in my opinion. But there are a lot of ways to power these fire guys up, and I think it's going to be a really, really strong archetype looking forward. So as far as some other stuff here, we have Kingdra, and Kingdra is a stage 2. For 1 water energy, it's got Brine. Choose one of your opponent's Pokemon with damage counters on it. It does 90 to it, so pretty strong. And then Tornado Shot, 90 and discard a water energy, and does 30 to an opponent's bench Pokemon. So as you can see, you're already kind of setting up knockouts throughout the game. My only concern is that it's just a stage 2. I mean, it's hard to get out. Rare Candy's needed. If this was a basic, it would be just ridiculous. So I can understand why they did that, but maybe a stage 1 would have been better because you still have to spend the turn evolving and risk getting knocked out. But I mean, it's really strong. I just wish there was a way to get these guys out a little better. But then again, I mean, it is a water type, so maybe it'll have some synergy with Alolan Vulpix or Ninetales or something. But in general, you know, it's just going to come down to whether or not these guys can actually get put on the board. So hopefully there'll be a better way to you know, get these evolution cards out. Now, Wobbuffet is, you know, it's not horrible. It's pretty decent. I wanted to talk about it for a second. 50 damage times each colorless in your opponent's active's retreat cost. So anything that has a 3 retreat cost, Wobbuffet is doing 150, and then a Choice Bandit's doing 180. So this could be good in a Lunala deck if you have to have a non-EX attacker. Maybe you don't want to use the non-GX Lunala, but you want to use Wobbuffet instead. So, I mean, it could be pretty good. Hard to say for sure. As far as some other cards here, I'm just kind of scrolling through. Don't really see a whole lot notable right now. There's another Passimian, but this one isn't quite as good as the one that lets you do like 30 times the number of Passimian on your bench. We see our next GX. It's got some really interesting artwork here. It's really colorful, kind of dark, but Alolan Muck GX, I should say, evolves from Alolan Grimer. And again, Alolan Grimer here has one of these attacks where you can attack for 0 energy. And it says that for 0 energy, you can use Multiply, search your deck for Alolan Grimer, put it on your bench, and then shuffle your deck. So this is a great way to make sure that you have an Alolan Grimer out. It's going to make sure that your opponent doesn't just kind of one-shot you and you pretty much lose the game. At least you can get another Alolan Grimer out and get set up there. But the Alolan Muck is what we're really concerned with. So for 3 energy, it has Chemical Press, 10 damage, 70 more for each special condition on your opponent's active. And you might be thinking, well, how do I get those special conditions on my active? And that's where we're going to be playing its GX attack. And this is called Tri-Hazard. Choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, switch it, so kind of like a Lysander effect. And the new active is Poisoned, Burned, and Confused. So use that and then use Chemical Press, and you're doing 220 damage right there. But I think it's going to need a little more acceleration. I think it's going to need a way to put these special conditions on the board, because the GX, you can only use it once, the GX attack. So maybe Salazzle, maybe something that actually pairs with it to put the conditions on the board every single turn. Darkrai is going to be an interesting GX attacker. It puts your opponent to sleep for 2 energy, so not horrible. But Dark Raid, if your opponent has used their GX attack, it is 80 more. So basically, first turn attach a Dark Energy, second turn a DCE, and then with a Choice Band, you're doing 190 a turn. But it's really situational because you have to make sure your opponent has played their DC or their GX attack. So situational, but could work. Now, this Diancie is what I was referring to earlier in the video. It has an attack called Sparkling Prayer. Search your deck for a Pokemon that evolves from one of your Pokemon and evolve it. So it kind of bypasses that evolution roll. It's going to get you some evolutions out turn 1 when you use the attack. And it has some synergy with Gardevoir because I can have Ralts out, the basic, use Sparkling Prayer, and immediately have Kirlia, and then the following turn you just put out the Gardevoir. So I think this is going to be the ideal way of setting up that Gardevoir. I don't think it's going to be so much of the using the rare candies and stuff. You might still play a couple in the deck, but generally speaking, I think for the first couple turns of the game, you just kind of sit here and do this. I mean, you can first turn, like I said, get the Kirlia and have the Gardevoir out the following turn, and then on that turn, maybe you put Kirlia out and use Diancie to get the Gardevoir out. Maybe you just sit there for a couple turns and just make sure that you get them out. Again, the metal typing is very solid, and the dark resistance is also really good in a format where Turbo Darkrai, Yveltal, stuff like that are still pretty popular decks. So as we continue to scroll through here, Noivern GX is kind of like the love child between Seismitoad EX and Giratina EX. So it seems like they're kind of mixing attacks and abilities here and there, kind of like how they did with Tapu Lele, how it's a mix of like Jirachi EX with Stellar Guidance and Lugia and Mewtwo and X-Ball and stuff. But Noivern is kind of like a mix between Seismitoad and Giratina, but a little more balanced. So Distortion for a dark and colorless, or in this format, just a double dragon, it's doing 50 and your opponent can't play items. And then Loud Sonic for 120 for 3 energy during your opponent's next turn. They can't play special energies. So kind of a toned down Giratina as far as that attack goes, instead of tools and stadiums as well. But I mean, this could be really, really strong going ahead. It is a stage 1, but that's not too bad. Maybe you attach a Psychic or a Dark on the bench, and then the next turn on another Noivern, it's kind of hard to say, we attach a Double Dragon and we use Distortion to item lock. So hard to say for sure. And then Explosive Sound Wave does 50 to each of your opponent's Pokemon. So that could be pretty good. Maybe early on, just gonna spread damage, or even just finish things off. I don't know. Maybe you item lock them, Lysander something else up, keep item locking them, and then you spread the damage and knock them out and get multiple prize cards. Hard to say, but it could be pretty interesting. So as far as some other stuff here, looks like we're going to be finishing up with our trainers. We've covered all the Pokemon in this really big set. We have Rotom Deck's Pokefinder mode, so look at the top 4 cards of your deck, put them back in any order. So that's pretty good if you're looking for a certain card. Maybe you have Acrobike or Octillery, and that way you can kind of draw them that way. Muscle Dumbbells is a pretty interesting item card. It is a tool card, of course, and it says if this Pokemon is attached to stage 1, it gains 40 HP. So maybe stage 1 decks are bound to see some play. My only issue is that tool removal is a thing now. Fill Blower is in every deck. I play 2 in pretty much all of my decks because I think it's standard at this point. If you play any abilities whatsoever in your deck, you have to play 2. And a lot of people just play it as a counter stadium now. Just play 2 or 3 of those instead of a stadium and you're good to go, because a lot of times a stadium, you're just playing it just to counter another stadium. So Fill Blower is already really popular. So I really like the effect. It's just hard to say if it'll see any play in the future. We have Kiawe, and Kiawe says search your deck for 4 fires, attach them to one of your Pokemon, and then your turn ends. Regardless, this is a really, really strong attack because you're getting 4 energy on the board out of nowhere. So power up a Volcanion and then just pass. Power up just anything like Ho-Oh, for example, and just pass. I think it'll have a lot of potential, so be on the lookout for that. It's got a really pretty full art, but this artwork is really cool as well, so I really like it. I like how they're really trying to encourage a supporter-driven type of energy acceleration, because Aqua Patch, Max Elixir kind of give an unfair advantage to a certain type. It's good that at least it's balanced in the sense that your turn ends if you have to play that supporter and get the energy on the board. So as far as some other stuff, we have Plumeria. Discard 2 cards to use the card, and then you have to discard an energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So it's like Team Flare Grunt, except it works on the bench, but you have to pay 2 cards to use it. This could be a good 1-of in Sylveon decks, or you could even, who knows, you might even play it as a 4-of in Sylveon decks, because being able to knock up those energies every single turn is really, really strong. Now, in Expanded, if you are, I guess, gutsy enough to play it, you could play the Propagation Execute, and that way it'll kind of reduce the cost of that attack, or the supporter. Propagation Execute, if you don't know what it does, it's kind of an older card. I think it was from like Plasma Freeze or something, but you can, whenever you discard the Execute, you can basically just get it back out of the discard. So a lot of people used to play it with like Ultra Ball, Superior Energy Retrieval, with Blastoise decks, stuff like that. So could see some Sylveon action and Expanded, hard to say for sure. The stadium in this mini set is Mount Lanakila, and it says the retreat cost of each player's basic Pokemon is increased by 1. So this could be pretty good in evolution decks. Maybe you're just kind of forcing your opponent to do something. This is kind of like a replacement for Team Aqua's, I think it's Team Aqua's secret base or something. I know it's a Team Aqua's hideout stadium or something, I don't know, but this could be a replacement for that card in Standard when it rotates. So Sylveon decks will at least have this to make it a little harder for Pokemon to retreat out. And then finally we have our full arts, again really, really pretty, emphasizing that nice deep red color on Ho-Oh. Just really beautiful artworks. It's great that they have like hyper rares, full arts, really drives the prices down of these cards, makes them a little easier to obtain. And at the same time, your collectors love it as well. That gold Ho-Oh is just really pretty. And then a gold escape rope. So we see a secret rare escape rope. So good to see it's not leaving the format. And the muscle dumbbells and fire energy. So that is pretty much it. I think that wraps it up. There are a ton of cards in the set. It looks like the focus on the set is going to be on these big GXs like Necrozma and Mars Shadow, as well as Ho-Oh and Charizard. I think those are your big 4 from the set. But that's going to wrap it up, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the set. Burning Shadows, what cards do you think we're going to see in the set in August? What cards are going to be missing the cut? And let me know if you want to see more videos like this. Again, this is more of like an initial thoughts video, so it's not really a set review so much as you know, just kind of going over the set itself, just kind of some early thoughts and impressions. But, you know, let me know the feedback. Let me know what kind of videos you guys want to see in the future, because I'm really trying to expand the channel. Like I said, deck profiles, deck analysis is great, but I feel like every channel kind of does that at this point, and I really want to expand it and do some other content. So let me know what you want to see. And be sure to subscribe and like our channel. We've hit over 2,000 subscribers. My goal by the summer is 2,500, so keep pushing towards that. But in the meantime, this has been Zach with Top Deck Nation. Really hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one as always.